Dyer Productions present The Story Slot, traditional stories and fairy tales adapted by Jane Grandle. The story in this episode is The Happy Family by Hans Christian Andersen.
The largest leaf around is the dock leaf. If you hold it up, it's like an apron. And in rainy weather, it's almost as good as an umbrella because it is so big. And the burdock never grows alone. Where there is one, there is also another, and another, and another. Snails love to eat burdock. The great white snails, which were the favourites of quality families for eating in times past, found it most delicious. And so, burdock seeds were sown just for them. Now, there was an old manor house where they no longer ate snails. The snail family were quite extinct. The burdocks, though, were even more lush and healthy than ever. They kept growing and growing all over the pathways and flower beds, like a forest. Here and there were a plum or apple tree. Otherwise, nobody would have known it was a garden. The only snails left in this burdock forest were two venerable old snails. Even they did not know how old they were, but they could remember that there used to be many, many more of them. They could remember that they were a family from far-off lands, and that the forest had been planted especially for them. They had never been outside of it, but they knew there was still something else out there, called the manor house, and that the others of their family had been boiled and laid out on a silver platter. They didn't know what this meant. They could not possibly imagine. But they knew it was said to be delightful and very genteel. The other creatures in the garden couldn't tell them any more information. None of them had ever been boiled or laid on a silver platter. The old white snails knew they were distinguished. After all, the forest had been planted for their sake. And the manor house was there so that they could be boiled and laid on the silver platter. They lived a very lonely life, as they had no children, but they adopted a little common snail, which they brought up as their own. But the little one would not grow magnificent like them, for he was only a common snail. But Dame Mother Snail was convinced she could see him growing bigger, and begged Father Snail to at least feel the little one's shell. When he felt it, he found that the good dame was right. One day, there was a heavy rainstorm.
Hear how it beats on the dock leaves like a drum.
It's going to get quite flooded. We are all three lucky to have our good, safe house. We have much more than all the other creatures, for we are provided this house from birth, and the burdock forest is planted just for us. I would like to know how big the forest is and what is outside.
There is nothing at all. No place can be better than this, and we want for nothing.
I would willingly go to the manor house to be boiled and laid on a silver platter. All our forefathers have done it. There must be something special in it.
The manor house has probably fallen to ruin. Or perhaps our burdocks have grown up over it so that they can't get out. However, there is no rush about it. You are always in such a hurry, and the little one is beginning to be the same. He keeps climbing up the stalks. It gives me a headache to watch him.
You mustn't scold him. He creeps so carefully. He gives us so much pleasure. We have nothing else to live for. But have you thought, where shall we get him a wife? Don't you think perhaps there might be some of our species left in the distance of the burdock forest?
I dare say there are plenty of common snails without a house. But they are so conceited. But I suppose we could ask the ants to look out for us and see if they can find a little wife for our little snail.
I know one, sure enough. A most charming one. But I'm afraid we don't have much of a chance. She is a queen,
Oh, that's nothing.
Has she a house?
She does have a place, the finest ant's palace, with 700 passages.
No, thank you. Our son shall not go into an ant-hill. If you know nothing better than that, we shall ask the gnats. They fly far and wide in all weathers. They know the whole forest, within and without.
We have a wife for him. At 100 human paces from here, there sits a little snail in her house on a gooseberry bush. She is quite lonely and old enough to be married. It is only 100 human paces away.
Then let her come to him.
He has a whole forest of burdocks. She has only a bush.
So the gnats went and fetched little Miss Snail. It was a whole week before she arrived, but as soon as she did, they could see the journey was worthwhile, for she was of their species. So the marriage was celebrated, nicely and quietly, for the old folks couldn't bear too much excitement. But old Dame Snail made a brilliant speech. Father Snail could not speak, for he was so overjoyed. As dowry and inheritance, the old folks gave the new couple the whole forest of burdocks, and said what they had always said, that it was the best in the world. They told the young couple that if they lived honestly and decently, and increased and multiplied, they and their children would one day go to the manor house and be boiled and laid on silver dishes. After the speech was made, the old ones crept into their shells and never more came out. They slept while the young couple governed in the forest and had numerous progeny. But they were never boiled and never came out on silver platters. So they concluded that the manor house had fallen into ruins and that all the men in the world must be extinct. The rain beat on the dock leaves to make music for the snail family's sake, and the sun shone in order to give the burdock forest a colour for their sake. And they were all very, very happy ever after.
You've just heard the story of the Happy Family. Father Snail was played by Carlos Mendoza, the Mother Snail by Layla Katib, the Gnat by J.D. Kelly, with additional voices by Jamie Dyer. The narrator was Jane Grandle, who also adapted the story. The story slot was brought to you by J. Dyer Productions.